East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America as president and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Well, sure looked a lot different earlier in the day. It looked a lot different an hour ago. But if you go back to this morning, the president threatened to wipe out the whole civilization of Iran if the regime didn't agree to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by 8 p.m. Eastern. CBC's Katie Nicholson is tracking this developing story for us from Washington. Katie, as I've mentioned, this post suddenly appearing 15, 20 minutes ago. So I don't expect there's a lot more we know about it, but what else do we know?
Well, I can tell you that this now does appear to be a 2-week ceasefire that Iran is on board with. The New York Times just alerting that the new supreme leader has apparently agreed to the terms here. So this is really sort of an extraordinary development after a day of quite a bit of people really sort of concerned after Trump's rhetoric this morning in that post. So let's just go through this. This is essentially a signal from the White House. This is going to be a 2-week ceasefire hinging on whether or not Iran immediately reopens the Strait of Hormuz. There's also a signal here. Trump says in that post that 10-point plan from Iran. This is the 10-point plan that was presented to Pakistan yesterday by Iran after it sort of vetoed an American plan earlier in the day. That is, according to the U.S. president, a good, solid basis for negotiations. And interesting, just some of the things that were in that. They were looking for instead of a brief ceasefire, they were looking for a longer remedy to this conflict. And one of the things that they were also reportedly looking for in that 10-point plan were reparations for some of the damage. They were trying to get Congress involved as well. So interesting to see what the White House does over this 2-week period. But those are two very significant developments in that post. And also, Ian, this was posted about 90 minutes before that self-imposed 8 p.m. deadline from the U.S. president, where he had threatened that had this deal not been secured, he would rain down on civilian infrastructure. This also gives him a bit of an off-ramp. Seems like he may have been looking for that. He is always sensitive about that phrase, taco Trump always chickens out. Now, the way that this has been presented is that it's a very sensible deal that is being brokered by Pakistan. There are terms that are acceptable. You'll notice the language he uses in that post. He is talking about the military objectives having been met. This is something that the U.S. has said several times over the last couple of weeks. And all of this comes after hours of what Pakistani officials had called very sensitive negotiations between the parties. This is new, so maybe we should just go through this one more time. I wonder if we could just pull the post up and just read for the audience what it says. And basically, he says, based on conversations with the Prime Minister and Field Marshal of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran, agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received this 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America as president and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it's an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Again, Ian, this is also after a day of several hours of quite a few missile interceptions in Bahrain and the UAE. So it's been a heavy day of shelling as all of this has been happening.
Yeah, it is not often on a television program where the host and a reporter would read a long social media post verbatim. The reason we're doing that, of course, is that it seems to change everything. The trajectory of the ultimatum this morning from Donald Trump and the countdown to 8 p.m. Eastern and his bombastic statements about what he was going to do, all of a sudden a change in direction in the last half hour as spelled out by that post. There was, as you well know, outrage throughout the day about that ultimatum, particularly from those, maybe exclusively from those, who are politically opposed to the president. But there were some members of his own party also that were part of, that were opposed to this. Is there any way of gauging this evening if that opposition had any impact on what Donald Trump just announced?
It is hard to say, but there was a groundswell, particularly towards the later part of the day, of some Republicans who are still in Congress and don't normally speak out against the president, starting to weigh in and criticize that language in that post, which of course was jarring, shocking, even from this president who was prone to this kind of bluster. Just a reminder to the audience, he said in that post this morning that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. He went on to say that he didn't want that to happen, but it probably will. So what was interesting, too, was all of these voices from around the world that came forward. Now, not surprisingly, the UN condemned that language, but Pope Leo, an American, also sort of condemned and said that to say something like that, wiping off the face of the earth an entire community or country, he was very harshly critical of that, and then went on to push for a more peaceful solution. Pope Leo saying that this is truly unacceptable language, and then he went on to talk a little bit more about alleged or potential war crimes if you target civilian infrastructure. Here's a little bit from Pope Leo today.
Let's talk, let's look for solutions in a peaceful way, and let's remember especially the innocent, children, the elderly, the sick, so many people who have already become or will become victims of this continued warfare. To remind all that attacks on civilian infrastructure is against international law, but that it is also a sign of the hatred, the division, the destruction that the human being is capable of. And we all want to work for peace. People.
And, there were people from the far right, the conservative voices that sometimes make up Trump's base, people like Alex Jones, who had a particular tweet today where he called Trump's comments unhinged and likened him to a Marvel supervillain. And then we also heard from Republicans who are not afraid normally to criticize the president, moderates like Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. She had this post today. She said that the president's threat that a whole civilization will die tonight cannot be excused away as an attempt to gain leverage in negotiations with Iran. She goes on in her post to say this type of rhetoric is an affront to the ideals of our nation, our nation has sought to uphold and promote around the world for nearly 250 years. It undermines our long-standing role as a global beacon of freedom and directly endangers Americans both abroad and at home. And of course, Ian, it cannot be ignored just how deeply unpopular the idea of a long, drawn-out conflict in Iran is with the American public. We see it in poll after poll. Trump was very aware that Americans don't want a long, dragged-out conflict. He referenced it yesterday. And so he is very aware of all of these pressures. And no doubt that also sort of nudged this forward, this ceasefire, which we assume is kicking in. I mean, Sasha will probably be able to tell you more.
Yeah, so just before I let you go, let's quickly, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I don't know is a completely acceptable answer. But just to bring our audience up to speed, because, we were waiting for this 8 o'clock Eastern time deadline to come and go and to see if Trump would act on his threats. 40 minutes ago or so, all of a sudden this abrupt turn and this 2-week ceasefire is announced. So this program is on live for the next hour and 50 minutes. I think we are going to see developments in that time period. But as of right now, let me ask you the following things. First of all, is there any plan? Have you heard anything about Donald Trump speaking publicly beyond his Truth Social post? Is he going to be getting in front of a camera, microphone later on this evening? Have we heard?
I have not heard that yet, and I am just sort of trying to look at my laptop to see if I've gotten a note from the White House pool yet. That would be the first way to find out. A lid has been called by the White House pool, which means that he is not going to be speaking with any reporters. However, perhaps there might be an address, something recorded. I can't rule that out. But right now, it looks like we may not hear from the U.S. president, at least in a venue where he's speaking with reporters at any time soon.
Okay. All right, let's leave it there, and we'll fill in whatever blanks we can over the next, as I say, hour and 48 minutes or so. Katie Nicholson, live in Washington. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to our CBC senior correspondent, Sasha Petrusik, who is in Jerusalem, who's been monitoring the latest in this dispute. Sasha, Trump calling off his deadline at the last moment. Where do things stand in the Middle East right now?
Well, it's hard to say. The fact that he called it off did not stop the sirens from going off here and some loud booms in the sky just a few minutes ago. So I think it may take a little bit before this does actually kick in. I'm not sure from what has been said so far whether there's an actual time that's been set for when this ceasefire is supposed to kick in. But I can tell you, most of the countries, certainly the Gulf countries in the region, will be very happy about this. They will be breathing a sigh of relief tonight. But also, I think they will be a little bit skeptical about how this is going to play out, because a 2-week ceasefire does not mean necessarily that the war is actually over and that the missiles will stop flying. We've seen that with other situations here. Gaza is a good example. That fighting is still going on, even though there has been a ceasefire since last October. So I think here we have a situation where it'll have to be wait and see. Certainly on the Gulf side, they will hope that this will mean that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen very quickly right now and will stay open. They want that oil flowing quickly, and they don't want any more damage to their cities or those facilities. Israel is a slightly different situation. We have been hearing from the public broadcaster here tonight that the Israeli government has been informed of this and is part of this ceasefire arrangement. We don't know much more than that, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been pushing for this war for years now, really, and has called Iran an existential threat to Israel. I'm not sure that he's changed his mind. I think that he has been quite happy to continue the strikes. Even today, they were hitting railway stations and bridges. And I think Israel has been out in front in pushing for a lot of this, including getting rid of those top leaders. So whether that continues and whether the United States will be able to continue keeping Israel kind of in line, that will be an open question.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's early in the morning in Israel, throughout the Middle East. I'm thinking it's possible that in the United States, we may hear developments on the story from the president and political reaction given the time. What about in Israel and elsewhere in the Middle East? Given the hour, would you expect to really not hear anything substantive until, after 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning?
That's quite possible. The other issue here is that this is the last day of Passover. It is a holiday in Israel. So normally we do not get politicians coming out under those circumstances. But I am sure that they will get their messages out. Netanyahu has been quite careful to echo at least the tone, if not always exactly the words, of Trump with the different twists and turns that this war that this conflict has taken, when Trump has suggested that the leadership in Iran is okay to deal with. That's sort of what we've been hearing here. And when Trump has taken a harder line, again, that's come back here. So I expect that that will be what we will be hearing here. As far as the rest of the Gulf is concerned, I think that there will be a lot of support for this diplomatic solution at this point. There has been some suggestion that this is the time to deal with Iran firmly and definitively, because a lot of these countries do not really trust and don't feel comfortable with Iran, and certainly don't feel comfortable with Iran controlling the Strait of Hormuz. But they also don't want the war to continue, partly because of the oil revenue and also because, well, they have missiles raining down on them, and they've taken some of the hardest hits over the past 5 weeks.
Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So our headline this hour, the United States announcing a 2-week ceasefire with Iran. That announcement coming just 90 minutes before a deadline that Trump had imposed on Iran to reach an agreement, or that the United States would wipe out, in his words, an entire civilization. We often turn to Nader Hashemi for analysis on Middle East issues. He's a Canadian who is also an associate professor of Middle East and Islamic politics at Georgetown University in Washington. Nader, when you heard of this Truth Social post in the last 45 minutes that there is a 2-week ceasefire, or at least Trump says there is, what was your reaction to that?
Well, obviously a huge sigh of relief, because the entire world was focused on 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to see whether Donald Trump would carry through on his threat yesterday, and then, of course, this morning, to destroy an entire civilization. And let's be clear what he was actually threatening to do. He was threatening genocide. I mean, this is the level of moral depravity that the world has to deal with this American president when he's making these types of threats. So obviously, it's a good thing that there is a ceasefire. But let's not have any illusions. 2 weeks can pass by very quickly, and we can be at the exact same point that we are, or that we were just 45 minutes ago. So full kudos to the Pakistanis, who sort of negotiated a ceasefire. But I think the underlying issues still remain to be determined between the two sides.
Nader, knowing what you know of this part of the world and the competing and often very, angry divisions, does it sound likely to you that this ceasefire will hold beyond 2 weeks, that there is the foundation here for a lasting agreement?
Well, that remains to be determined. Obviously, I think both sides want an out, but the question is on what terms can a settlement be reached. I think Donald Trump clearly has bitten off more than he can chew. He thought Iran was Venezuela. He thought he could have a quick victory. He underestimated the Iranian resolve to fight back and to absorb the strikes. Iran is hurting substantially. But I think from Iran's perspective, they don't simply want a ceasefire that can then be broken, because, they've gone through, they've been in that position not too long ago. And I'm referring to the June war of last year, where they agreed to a ceasefire. And then 6 months later, they suffered heavy punishment, almost the toppling of the regime, the killing of most of the senior leadership. So I think Iran is looking for some deeper and longer standing guarantees, a non-aggression pact, some sort of lifting of the sanctions, access or some influence over the future of the Straits of Hormuz. And I'm not sure if the Americans under Donald Trump are willing to give those concessions, because any lifting of the sanctions will be considered capitulation to Iranian demands. So I think there's a lot left to be resolved here. And I think it's really the work of intense diplomacy that's going to have to kick in over the next couple of weeks to prevent us from being where we were just 45 minutes ago, where it looked like Donald Trump was going to unleash hell on the Iranian people.
And Nader, we're just getting some information here from Iranian state media, and I'm very interested in getting your analysis to this. State media saying Iran forced the U.S. to accept a 10-point plan that included controlled transit through the Strait of Hormuz and lifting of sanctions. They also say talks with the U.S. do not mean an end to the war. So not a lot of detail in there, but as you hear those words, what's your reaction?
Well, of course, Iran is going to try and spin this as a win that Donald Trump capitulated. I mean, there's some merit to that because this 10-point plan that Iran proposed came out late last night, early this morning. Donald Trump said it was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't good enough. Clearly, his views have changed over the last, 12 hours. So, let's all celebrate that we're not facing the type of destruction that Donald Trump has promised. But I think these underlying issues related to what the Islamic Republic believes are its core security needs, to have some sort of non-aggression pact so it's not attacked again, some sort of sanction relief. I mean, those things have to be negotiated. I can see sort of different ways forward, but I think the devil is going to be in the details. And what's really required now is really intense diplomacy to prevent us from another catastrophe that seemed imminent just an hour ago.
I know your expertise is on the politics of the Middle East, but you live in the United States. You drive by, presumably, gas stations all the time. Not to be too simplistic about this, but how much do you think the rising price of gas and the economic part of the impact of closing the Strait of Hormuz, what impact do you think that had on how Trump has acted?
Well, I think that was huge. I think that's a really good point, Ian. Donald Trump, many times over the last 6 weeks has said the war is coming to an end. He would sort of give an indication that, things were about to wrap up. And every time he would make those gestures, the price of oil would drop. That would help him a little bit, but then they would rise up very quick. The price of oil would rise up. The price of gas would increase significantly, within 24 hours as the war would continue. So I suspect that's really where Donald Trump is vulnerable. It's domestically. The war is very unpopular. He claimed to be a president that was supposed to improve the economic lot of Americans. They're suffering economically already. The price of gas hasn't helped Donald Trump's prospects. So those are, good questions to ask.
Yeah, okay. Well, Nader, thank you very much for speaking with us. As I say, we always appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Nader Hashemi, an associate professor of Middle East and Islamic politics at Georgetown University. Before the temporary ceasefire, Mark Carney shared his thoughts about President Trump's threats to Iran. We'll have more on the Prime Minister's position next on CBC News Network. Well, here's a live look at the White House this hour. What was initially a critical deadline for the Middle East war has now been, it appears, averted, with the U.S. President Donald Trump announcing on social media a last-minute ceasefire. He says the attacks on Iran will now pause for 2 weeks on the condition that the Strait of Hormuz reopens immediately. Iran's Supreme National Security Council says it has accepted a 2-week ceasefire in the war. Earlier today, Prime Minister Mark Carney responded to the threats from the U.S. directed to Iran. His comments came before Trump announced that he would suspend his military campaign, a move that Carney was urging for.
Canada expects all parties in this conflict, in any conflict, to respect international laws, the rules of engagement, and that means not targeting certainly civilians or civilian infrastructure. And we urge all parties in this war to follow those responsibilities.
Well, a question we will be asking throughout this program is what to make of this ceasefire, and especially from a Canadian perspective. What should we in this country be watching for? Well, our next guest was Canada's senior diplomatic official in Iran from 2009 to 2012. Dennis Horak joins us now. And Dennis, drawing on your experience dealing with Iran, what do you make of what appears to be a 2-week ceasefire?
It's always complicated dealing with the Iranians. From what I've seen on their acceptance of the ceasefire, they seem to put a caveat in there about coordinating with the Iranian authorities and technical issues, and which is very typical about the way they negotiate. I presume the Americans will accept that, although it does seem to suggest that Iran retains control of the strait. So it may be problematic, but that's how dealing with Iran negotiations tend to go.
Okay, so it's fantastic having somebody with your deep experience in dealing with Iran on the program. So you've got the complications of the Iranian regime. You have the complications of the American leadership, Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, et cetera, an approach to, I don't even know if we call it diplomacy, international relations that maybe is a little different than what we've seen from other presidents and secretaries of defense or war. And then you have Pakistan. And for those of us who don't know a lot about Pakistan's likely role, why are they brokering this deal and what do they have to offer?
It was unusual, actually. I was very surprised. The normal mediator in this situation is Oman. They were involved in mediating previous negotiations between the U.S. and Iran and have been for decades, really. It was a little surprising. I mean, they were involved in the last ones, and perhaps the Iranians felt that the Omanis were no longer a useful conduit. Also, the Omanis, their territory was hit by Iranian missiles, so perhaps they felt that they were somehow involved in this war in a way they hadn't been in the past. Pakistan is not involved directly in this, and perhaps that's why they stepped into the breach. Turkey and Egypt also tried at certain points, but Pakistan seems to have taken the lead here, which is a bit unusual.
We're getting lots of coverage, of course, in Canada of U.S. politics. Help us better understand what's happening in Iran here. You have a country which has been hit by military strikes from Israel and the United States. They seem to have been relentless military strikes. You have a country that was facing a threat in half an hour from now of an entire civilization being destroyed. What's left of Iran? How much power does the regime have? And just kind of help us understand that a little bit.
Well, from the regime's perspective, they're doing well. I think they believe they have the upper hand, and the Straits of Hormuz is a card that they have taken. We were never sure whether they'd be able to control it the way they have. They've now demonstrated that they can. That gives them a level of leverage that they really haven't had for a while. So I think they're feeling pretty good about that. Yes, they've been pounded and they've been beaten down, and militarily they've been crushed. Their leadership has been, various levels have been wiped out, but they're surviving. And for them, that's victory. And for them, that's strength. And the fact that now you've got the American president sort of offering them another 2 weeks in exchange for at least a conditional opening of the Strait of Hormuz, it seems. I think they're feeling that they're in a relatively strong position going forward into these negotiations. Surprisingly, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's the reality. That's the regime's objective. It's an existential crisis from the very beginning, and they're surviving it. For them, that's victory.
If this ceasefire were to hold, Iran will declare victory. Donald Trump will declare victory. What about Israel?
It's a bigger question. I don't really know, and I think it does indicate that the Americans are in the driver's seat on this one. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It depends what sort of conditions that future ceasefires put on the Israelis. The Iranians have been talking about wanting to have the war in Lebanon brought in under this umbrella. I think it would be very difficult for the Israelis to accept that, given the challenges posed by Hezbollah. So that's going to be a bit of a complicating factor if Iran insists on that.
Well, our television audience seeing the super under the screen there with the various places you served as ambassador to, and also former Canadian head of mission to Iran between 2009 and 2012. Dennis Horak, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Coming up, we'll speak to a Canadian here who has family in Iran to get reaction to news of this 2-week ceasefire. That's next on CBC News Network. Let's take another look at the White House live this hour. The U.S. president saying that he has agreed to suspend attacks on Iran for 2 weeks. This comes just hours after his threat that, quote, a whole civilization would die tonight if a deal was not struck by 8 p.m. Trump says a ceasefire will be double-sided, with Iran agreeing to immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz. How are Iranian Canadians reacting to this news? Parisa Moshfegh joins us now in studio. We originally asked you to come in when we thought we would be just moments ahead of that 8 o'clock deadline, and those dire threats from Donald Trump, all of a sudden news of a 2-week ceasefire. What's your reaction?
Honestly, it's a bit, it's bitter and sweet. We're all scared of the wiping out civilization threat. However, let's also not forget that Iranian people asked for this war. We asked for help. Trump said that help is on its way. We asked for help because we thought that we can't fight the Islamic regime barehanded.
And so how do you feel about how the war has gone up until now? Because, you know, institutional military targets have been hit hard, but also civilians have been hit.
It's heartbreaking, but I think it's really important to understand that war started 47 years ago on the Iranian people. Even during the war, they have been executing young protesters as young as 18 years old. There's so many other young people who are queuing up to be executed by the hand of the regime. It's good to see that the regime has been weakening. However, I think for the Iranian people, the actual win would be the Islamic regime being gone.
So go back to February 28th, when you heard that Israel and the United States were beginning this military action against Iran and that the leader of Iran had been killed. You were, I guess, hopeful that change was about to happen. And you felt that you had kind of common cause with what the United States and Israel was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge celebrations from what I heard that was happening in Iran. I had people calling me from Iran right away saying that they woke up with the people, with the sound of people celebrating on the streets, and also like from their windows, just celebrating and screaming at night. So it's been a relief to see that the leaders of this organized mob that has been conducting violence against the Iranian people for 47 years, getting wiped out. However, it is also heartbreaking to see bombs getting dropped on people and innocent lives being at risk.
I'm curious about like the optimism you would have had early on in this conflict and thinking you had the might of the American military on your side, and then having the president say that he was going to wipe out a civilization. Did you feel betrayed at all?
We were just hoping that it was just a threat. The tweet itself, it started with wiping out a civilization and it ended with God bless the people of Iran. We've heard like a lot of contradictory news tweets from Trump before the war, during the war, and as you see, like today. So it's just been playing a lot with our emotions. There's a lot of anxiety, but I think we're still hopeful, and we're still hoping that this would end this regime, because if war ends and if the Islamic Republic stays, I think this will be the end of Iran, and it'll be the end of many, many more innocent lives.
Let me finish with this. I don't know if you've been able to reach your family. I know some people have not been. But do you have any sense of how they're doing through all of this?
They are enduring the war because they have hope. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing. Economically, it has become tougher in Iran, and the government has been talking about waging war against Israel and the states for the past decades. However, they haven't built any type of safety plan for the people. So people are enduring, but we are hopeful, and we will stay strong.
Yeah, I can't imagine how tough it's been for you for a long time, but particularly the last few weeks. And I do appreciate you coming in and chatting with us. Parisa Moshfegh, an Iranian Canadian. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, for our next guest, this issue is both personal and professional. Kaveh Shahrouz is a member of Toronto's Iranian Canadian community. He's also a lawyer and a former senior policy advisor on human rights to Global Affairs Canada. You have family in Iran, and I'm going to ask you the question I'm basically asking all of our guests on the program this evening: your reaction when you heard the news of this 2-week ceasefire.
Good to be with you, Ian. I have a mix of emotions. I think, first of all, just a sigh of relief. I mean, if Donald Trump was actually going to carry out the kind of attack that wiped out Iranian civilization, obviously that would be devastating. The human cost of that, and just on a personal level, the loss of my own family would come as a result of that. So it's a sigh of relief. But at the same time, I think there is a certain degree of I don't know what the exact right word is, but sadness that this regime is left standing. I think a few weeks ago, a lot of us that have fought for democracy and human rights in Iran for a long time thought that this regime that is so evil and has killed so many people and has tortured so many people, that this regime would fall. But it has proven more resilient than we thought. It is still standing, and I worry that it may actually end up being more cruel, if that can be imagined, and stronger as a result of having withstood American attacks.
You may have heard the conversation I had with Parisa just before connecting with you, and it was clear that she, and I'm sure a lot of Iranian Canadians, were hopeful at the beginning of this military campaign. She was hoping that this would lead to regime change. It has not so far. You point out it may leave a regime even more hardline than it was before. But have you gone through those stages as well, from optimism to uncertainty to maybe despair?
Absolutely. I have to be honest, at the beginning of this war, I was, I still, obviously, nobody wants to see their country of birth being bombed. But I felt much more hopeful. I felt that this regime was on its last days. I mean, the war started with the killing of Khamenei, the supreme leader, and something that I think a lot of Iranians celebrated. As the war has gone on, this regime has proved to be more resilient, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. It's been willing to fight in a way that I don't think a lot of people anticipated. And also there have been attacks on civilian infrastructure that, it's been very tragic to watch. And civilians have died, which, is always a cause for concern and sadness. So the initial enthusiasm has given way to something a little bit darker. And the worry is now that this regime is left standing, it will carry out mass executions. It will consider itself stronger and will consider itself to have stronger standing in the international community, which is obviously not an ideal outcome.
You're a lawyer, you're a supporter and advocate for human rights. The Prime Minister, Carney, has been urging all the parties to respect international law, but is also standing by his support for U.S. And Israeli attacks. What do you make of how he's handled this situation?
Frankly, I think he's done as good a job as can be expected. I mean, it's a very thin line that he has to walk, and I think he's walked it relatively well. I think the principle of it is that this is a just war. We lose sight of that sometimes because of Donald Trump's bluster. But, this is a war against the regime that for 47 years has terrorized its own people. It's terrorized its own neighborhood. It's carried out terror attacks all over the world. And it's one that really can't be negotiated with. So I think there is a very good argument that this is a just war. At the same time, Donald Trump has behaved and said things that are very clear violations of international law. There have been attacks that have hit civilian infrastructure. There was an attack on a school very early on in this war. Things that can't be justified, that are very clearly violations of international law. So I think Prime Minister Carney is trying to balance both things, and this statement, I think, is as good an articulation of that as any.
Knowing what you know of the complexities of the region and the regime, do you think this 2-week ceasefire will extend into something longer?
I suspect so. I think the Iranians have taken a lot of blows. I mean, they're left standing, but the upper echelons of the regime have been wiped out. Its military has been degraded significantly. So I think they are not keen to get back into the fight. And Donald Trump, I don't think, is keen to continue this fight. This has led to economic stagnation. It's led to, falling poll numbers. He, I don't think, has any desire to, revive the war after 2 weeks. I think the wild card here will be Israel as to whether or not they will feel bound by this ceasefire and whether or not they will continue once the 2 weeks are done.
Kaveh Shahruz, a lawyer and former senior policy advisor on human rights to Global Affairs Canada. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Ian.
Coming up, we'll switch gears and talk about historic firsts for the astronauts on Artemis II. Darius and Sarah will explain what happened on mission day 7. You're watching CBC News Network. It is day 7 of the Artemis II mission, and the 4 astronauts are now on their way home after that historic trip around the moon.
As the crew surpassed the Apollo 13 distance record, 252,756 miles from Earth. They relayed observations from the lunar surface. They've captured some incredible imagery. They performed a ship-to-ship call with their colleagues on the International Space Station.
NASA released photos of the far side of the moon. Scientists on Earth are now studying. One shows the total solar eclipse seen from the capsule that occurred when the moon blocked the sun from the astronauts' view. The crew is set to return to Earth on the Pacific Ocean off San Diego on Friday during our program. We're going to have live coverage of that. Let's bring in our science and climate specialist, Darius Mahdavi. And Darius, let's talk about the spectacular images that were sent back today.
I have to say, the hardest part of preparing for this was choosing the photos that I wanted to show, because there are so many that I was excited to talk about. So this one is one of my favorites. I think it's going to be probably the one that sinks into the public consciousness. This one is, they call it Earthset. You might know Earthrise.
I was going to say Earthrise, but this is Earthset. Okay.
Yeah. So Earthrise, the inspiration for the zero gravity indicator, the plushy toy that is on board with the Artemis II astronauts. That photo was taken from the Apollo missions and really inspired a new generation of environmental activism and showed people, what our planet really looks like from being so far away.
Well, David Saint-Jacques, a Canadian astronaut who was on the International Space Station, he did an interview earlier today, I saw on BBC, and behind him on the wall was that picture of Earthrise.
That's right. So that one, this one is the Earth disappearing behind the moon. So that's why we call it Earthset, just like the sunset. And I don't know, there's just something about it. You can see some of the continents on there, Oceania in particular, and there in the foreground is the moon, illuminated by the sun. This is another one of my favorites for a few reasons. This is during the solar eclipse that the astronauts experienced. Not like a solar eclipse on Earth, which can last, 5 or 6 minutes because the moon and the sun appear approximately the same size. But from their perspective, the moon is much closer. They had an eclipse that lasted nearly an hour, 54 minutes, nearly 54 minutes. And so mostly darkness. And then you can see the corona of the sun peeking out from behind. But I think the coolest part of this is a little bit of the near side of the moon. Should be in darkness because the sun is completely behind the moon. But off to the side over here, you have the Earth and what's called Earth shine. So just like we get moonlight reflecting off the moon gets light that reflects off the Earth and is illuminating part of the moon there. So some really incredible photos. And we heard from NASA earlier about what they're hoping people will take from these. Take a listen.
I'm thinking about our crew that are actually performing the work and then the payloads that have been provided that they're using. So everything that